Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 11 of Climbing the Ladder. I'm your host, ChanmanV, and joining me, as always, is John Clark of CSN, co-hosting with me. What's up, John?
Not much. How are you?
Good, good. Oh, man, the screen's kind of got messed up. Good old Skype. God, I love it. Let me try to fix the screen real quick. But today we got two guests. As usual, we have Carmac. How do you pronounce Carmac's name? I forgot to ask you that, John. So
Carmac. Oh, his real name?
Yeah.
Mikhail. I think it's Mikhail.
Mikhail Blachars, I guess is right.
I don't even care to say his last name. But.
Okay. But Carmac of ESL, he's product manager of IEM. Actually, IEM's coming up in a couple weeks, so it'd be great to talk to him about that. And we also have GWIN. Garrett Pretchell. He's a community caster. He's been kind of a lot of places lately. Gwyn works so hard, and it'll be great to get his perspective on being an up and coming caster, and just kind of what are the kind of hardships he's gone through just to even get where he's been or where he's at. So hold on, let me fix these screens. Skype like resized all these on me right when we started the show, so apologize for that. How was your weekend, John? You watched the World Cup or the Euro Cup finals?
Yes, I did. After it was 2-0, I stopped watching. Really.
It's pretty much over once it's 2-0. What's up, Garrett?
How you doing?
Quinn here. We're live, and figured I'd just.
Why do I feel underdressed?
Exactly, I do too, man.
Feel underdressed.
The hosts are underdressed.
It's okay.
Gwyn showing us up, man. What's up with that?
Well, that's I don't appear on camera unless I'm wearing a suit and a tie.
That's a good deal. Such a professional, man. That's what we need in esports, man. Professionals.
Amen.
So Carmac, guys, will be joining us in about 10-15 minutes. He's running a little bit late, so we're gonna start off with topics that deal specifically with GWIN. And mostly to do with casting, but we do have some topics that have to do with more tournament organization and GESL in particular, since Garrett was involved pretty heavily in that too.
Yep.
But to start off, why don't you talk about a little bit about your casting career and how you got started, and just kind of walk us through the timeline a little bit.
So starting out casting is kind of an interesting thing if you didn't get in at the very beginning. And when I say interesting, I mean it's kind of about who you know, but it's also about how much work and how much time you're willing to put in. And I really regret at the start of my career not putting in a lot more time. It was something I just started doing casually, and I didn't know if I wanted to really do a lot of. And I came to really enjoy it, and that's why I've put in the time that I have at this point. But let's see, the first casting gig that I got was for a team called Lazura. Probably never heard of them. Shortly after I joined the team, dropped their Starcraft 2 division completely, and they were like, oh, we'd like you to learn this game called League of Legends. And I was like, screw that, I want to play Starcraft. And so I did that instead, and I left that team, and I went to a team called Check 6 Gaming, who recently had some players do pretty well at MLG. Suppy, big shout out to him because he's awesome.
He's awesome.
Yeah. And so basically, I was doing a little bit of content for them, but I think this is kind of a critique from me about like all sort of the smaller North American pro teams, is that they want to do a lot of stuff, but they just don't have people to do it, and they don't have the organization to do it. And so Check 6 brought me on. They were like, yeah, you're going to do all this awesome content for us. And the end result of all that was that I didn't do any content because no one was giving me any direction, and I didn't have time to take the initiative myself to do a lot of content. So that was kind of the extent of that. And my first big break in casting came from a guy named Rant Costa. And it was for an organization called Cyber Sports Network. And I had heard of CSN. And Rance called me up. He's like, hey, Gwyn, I just did this show called The Rundown with Rance. I need a co-caster. And I was like, okay, I'll co-cast this for you. And Rance is actually a guy, and this kind of gets into the next part of my casting story, but Rant's actually a guy that I met at Day 9's launch party because he and Hogan Carter were running video production for Hogan's launch party. And I was like, oh, that's sweet. And I introduced myself to them because I was kind of a production guy myself. And so Rance calls me up, says, come cast this rundown with me, and that started really my career casting on a regular basis, because the stuff for Check 6 was just super sporadic. It was like, oh, let's do a VOD of these two players, and that was all it was. So kind of jumping in and casting for CSN once a week. I was driving up to Rance's house in Redondo Beach. We were casting for 4 or 5 hours from his living room, and then I'd come on home, and that was casting for a while for me. I decided I really liked it and that I was good at it. And part of the reason that happened for me is that I got a phone call from a gentleman named DJ Wheat. And I'd heard of Wheat, of course, because I was a Starcraft fan. And Wheat was like, hey, GWIN, you're really good at this. I'm going to help you become better. And I was like, what? Why are you calling me? How did you get my phone number? But, of course, I'm not going to complain because DJ Wheat is calling me. And this was like after rundown number 2 or 3 that he talked to me. So Wheat has since then kind of been responsible for a lot of the casting gigs I've gotten. He got me casting for Zeke TV, doing a lot of their European stuff, which I've since kind of resigned from. He got me casting for Beyond Gaming. I did all of the WCS qualifiers for Beyond Gaming, did all of CSN's WCS qualifiers, and then I did a whole bunch of Playham's WCS qualifiers as well. So there's all that. At the same time, I was casting for the local Southern California esports LAN circuit. Cable Starcraft runs an amazing little LAN circuit here. He runs these barcrafts, gets money from the barcrafts, and then puts on a $1,000 tournament every 3 months, which is kind of insane to think about. That every 2 to 3 months, a tournament in Southern California happens for $1,000. And I started casting for all those. Let's see, and that got me casting with a guy named Frodan, which is the reason I got into Playham. Let's see, what else? Casted the Dolby StarCraft II Invitational for a guy named Bobby Omari, who later was like, hey, GWIN, let's run a big event together. And that ended up being the Gigabyte Esports LAN. I should have never said yes to that.
We will talk about that in a second.
And Wheat was one of the people who recommended me for MLG Anaheim, and I ended up casting beta streams for MLG Anaheim as well. So I think that kind of brings it all up to date as far as what I casted. Oh, I got to cast some One Nation of Gamers, TT Esports Weekly Challenge. There might be a couple others that I'm forgetting, but I think those are the big ones, and sort of how I got into them. But it's really been Cybersports Network, CSN, for giving me that initial chance after Rance recommended me, and then DJ Wheat for kind of pushing me into a lot of different other organizations to get me casting.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of casters out there, that are just starting off and doing their own kind of YouTube videos, or they have their own Twitch site or Twitch streaming site, and they just try to stream any kind of random games. So I think it'd be great to get some advice from you, and why don't you give us an idea of just how much you work? I know personally how much you work, but why don't you kind of give some of those those wannabe, not wannabe casters, but those casters that that want to be successful, what they need to do, how much they need to work to become successful.
Well, I mean, for instance, the week before, or I guess not the week before MLG, but the 3 months leading up to MLG and Gigabyte Esports LAN, I was making a huge push to market myself as a caster and to do a lot of casting. So I was actually on a mic in front of a camera casting for about 25 hours every week for almost 2 months straight. And that was literally 4 or 5 hours a day, 4 or 5 days a week. I was casting Playam, I was casting Rundown, I was casting Beyond Gaming qualifiers, just everything I could get my hands on, literally everything. And so that was well and good to do that. Outside of casting, there's a lot of prep work that goes in to doing anything. Obviously, I have a green screen behind me. I have lighting that I have to turn on. I have to put on a suit if I'm going to cast. So there's a lot of other things outside that go on. And then there's all the the production stuff, doing things I have a logo behind me. That logo took time to make. A lot of times, tournament organizers aren't going to get you the graphics that you want or the graphics that you need to run stuff, and so you end up either making them yourself or just not having stuff. And I've always been kind of the one to just sort of step in and try and make it myself if I have time to do that. So that all takes time. One of the things that I don't do that I really should do, that I think a lot of other casters do, and this adds a ton of production time, is like taking the content, like hard recording it to disk, taking the content after, and then uploading it to YouTube. Cut it, like editing it and uploading, or even just cutting it off Twitch and putting it on YouTube. That's one of those things that I don't do right now. That I know since I've done YouTube content in the past, it's about to like take, if I say like I fraps what we're doing right now, and I'm frapsing it all to disk. Fraps, cut stuff up, and I think it's 4 GB chunks, and then I have to like put them all into Adobe Premiere. I need to put a bumper on either end, all that stuff, and then I need to render it out. So just rendering like an hour-long YouTube thing, that's maybe 15-20 minutes. Doing all the editing work is another 15-20 minutes. So you're probably looking at half an hour to 45 minutes of like prep time per YouTube video you want to upload. Is kind of the way it comes down. So you might be able to get a little bit faster if you like really smoothed out your production timeline, but the amount of time outside of casting that you have to spend prepping for casts and doing things like that is, I would say, maybe an hour per engagement. And then of course I try and go back through and watch all of the casting that I've done, because I want to improve. So I'll like watch, and I'll sit down with a notebook, and I'll write down things that I liked about the cast, like write down things I didn't like about the cast, and sort of make myself a list of things to improve on after pretty much every single cast I do. So that's the duration of the cast. If I casted for 5 hours, that is 5 hours of watching myself cast, which a lot of casters I don't feel like do. And I actually like hate watching myself. Like I can't stand it. Because I'm super critical, and I'm just like, oh god, he's so terrible. Why would I ever listen to this guy? And so I know exactly how everyone in chat feels, because that's all they ever say too.
Yet they still tune in. They
Exactly.
still tune in. That's good.
No, I mean, I think a lot of the, that's a lot of good tips, I think, for a lot of folks out there. Talk to us a little bit about, when you first got started, and I mean, were you just trying to look for as many casting gigs as possible, whether, obviously getting paid or not paid, or just small events, whatever.
Getting paid, I mean, that's funny that you mentioned that. Like, if you want to start out as a caster, you pretty much have to expect that you're going to make no money at all. Like, literally none. When I first started out, when I was first starting to, like, really push hard in, I spent a ton of time, like a ton of time, just on the Team Liquid tournament forum, looking at tournaments, looking to see if they had casters confirmed, and even if they did, I would PM the tournament organizer and be like, can I cast for this event? And I would send them my casting resume, which is a resume of all the events I've done. It's very professionally done. I had links to YouTube VODs, et cetera, et cetera. Be like, can I cast for this event, please? And I got a lot of no response at all. I got a lot of no. I got a lot of we already have casters confirmed. I got a lot of fuck off, we've never heard of you. And occasionally I'd get a, yeah, sure, you can cast for this event. And so that allowed me to cast for some events. And the more events I put on that resume, the better my resume looked, the more events would be like, oh, of course, we'd love you to come cast for us. So, yeah, it was literally just, I'd jump on the the tournament forum on Team Liquid, and be like, oh yes, let me check that out. So, and just PMing organizers. So that was kind of like the way that I got into doing a lot of tournaments. And I think that kind of the other approach to that is to take the YouTube side of things and just like get a lot of replays, cast the replays, put them on YouTube. And some casters go that route. I went the I only want to do live events route, because it's very easy for me to like block off a section of time to do a live event. But all of the production work outside that is involved in putting things on YouTube is stuff that I don't really enjoy. I much rather enjoy just showing up and doing a lot of live events. So.
Let's see. Hey, McCall, how's it going?
Hi.
Can you hear us?
Good.
Okay, great.
Oh,
Just
fantastic.
talking. Oh, we're just
John,
talking.
I see you're wearing very old school clothing.
Yeah, I did it on purpose. I thought I'd troll you a little bit.
That's funny. We're just talking to GWIN here a little bit about his casting
I'll be
crew.
right back, guys.
Okay,
I'll be
sure.
right back.
Yeah.
So, Gwen, are you glad that the rant blew up and he left CSN? Because he did blow up.
Yeah, no, he certainly did. So, I am and I'm not, right? So on one hand, it made the rundown a much more involved, much more stressful thing for me, because then I had to run all the production, and especially at the time when he did, I didn't have good enough internet here at the house to do that. Like, my internet was terrible. Like, it was 1.5 up, and I rarely got even half that from AT&T. So that was kind of one of those situations where I was like, well, shit, I guess I'm in a situation where I have to produce this show. I can't produce the show because I just don't have the net to do it. And that's really frustrating as a caster, to, like, want to do something and just not have the tech to do it.
Right.
On the other hand, I will say that, like, it allowed me to become a much better solo caster. The fact that he, kind of, because I ended up doing a lot of rundowns by myself. And I think that that's one of the things, and this is something I don't feel about myself at all, but when people watch me, they're like, yeah, GWIN is like a really good solo caster, and I'm like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Oh, look at that Carmac. He's got the GGL shirt on.
They got twins here, man.
Got
Got the same haircut and everything, too.
Yep, same haircut, same GGL shirt.
There's actually, Gwen, there's a huge GGL connection here, because DJ Wheat and Rants used to be
I know.
at GGL.
No. And it's interesting. I was actually thinking about it when I was showering before the show. DJ Wheat is indirectly responsible for me getting on the rundown as well.
You're thinking about DJ Wheat in the shower? What's wrong with you, man?
He's a handsome man. Like, who doesn't think about DJ Wheat in the shower? But no. I was like thinking about how I got into casting, because I knew that was going to be one of the topics of the show, and I was like, well, okay, so Rants contacted me to do the rundown with him, but how did Rant show up at Day 9's launch party? Day 9 had hired some people who flaked out at him at the last minute, and so he called up DJ Wheat, and he's like, Wheat, I need someone to produce this show for me. And Wheat was like, well, there's some guys in LA that'll do it. Their names are Rance and Hogan. And they got hired in literally like the day before the launch party to do it. And so the fact that, like, Rance was there and I met Rance there was because of Wheat. So I can really say that Wheat is, like, responsible for all of my casting career, all of it. It's kind of funny.
I think Wheat's just responsible for esports in general.
Seriously,
okay,
man.
we can do that. We can do that. I'm gonna all agree with that.
Marcus is everywhere, man. He's been everywhere forever now, too. So, really, really cool. All right, Garrett. We're just gonna get started on this. All right. So, talk to us about GESL, because I know you have a lot to say here, and just everything that went on. And I wanted to have you on when we had Bobby on here, but didn't work out, unfortunately, schedule-wise. So, kind of, me and John wanted to get your take on everything.
So, Gigabyte Esports LAN. I mean,
well, talk to us about what your role was first.
Okay, I was the executive producer for Gigabyte Esports LAN. So, from a technical standpoint, everything that happened on the tech side of things was my responsibility. All of the people I had involved were my responsibility. All of the casters were my responsibility. Yeah, that was it. I provided a lot of the gear, provided a lot of assets, provided a lot of music. Yeah, that's kind of how that went down. So it was a huge involvement in an event that especially casting MLG the weekend before, I didn't really have the time to be that involved, but no one else had more time than I did, and most people had much less time than I did. So it was just an event where I could kind of give like 10, 15 hours a week of thought and planning into it for about 2 months leading up to the event, and it required maybe 50 to 60 hours a week to make it all happen smoothly, but no one else we had on staff could give more than an hour a week. And so the responsibility falls on the people who have the most time, and that was guys like Bobby Omari and myself and a couple other people on the staff. So it was kind of rough. It was really rough.
All right, so talk to us about I guess the actual event and when it happened, because there are a lot of little issues that involved production, right?
Yep. Yeah, there certainly were. So I think the first problem was just that we had this vision of running 3 streams on the event, and we wanted one to be League of Legends and 2 to and that was kind of
right.
how we wanted to do things, and that was going to be like awesome. And when we kind of got down to it, Gigabyte wanted Starcraft to switch from main stage to not main stage. They wanted that switching, and that was like a technical aspect that wasn't really well communicated to me when I was designing the production layout for the event. And so we got there on Thursday to set up, and we only had one day to set up, which was another mistake, but that's all the venue would give us. But we got there on Thursday to set up and realize that we had this technical limitation. I was like, all right, well, then we have to either like bring a stream offline, which is gross. You never want to do that, and then bring another stream online. We were going to have to like bring League stream offline, bring Starcraft stream offline, and then like switch their locations and bring them back online. And I'm like, well, that's no good. We can't do that. Or you're going to have to say like the main stage stream is going to switch content between Starcraft and League of Legends, and that's like really bad as well, because you never want to tell your viewers on a stream, hey, go check out this stream that we're also running. It's going to have this content on it. Especially like you want people to like sit there, if they want to watch Starcraft 2, they should be able to watch nothing but Starcraft 2 on that stream. It should never switch content. So like that was a really big sort of concern. And what we ended up doing is we invented a production setup that worked, that allowed us to seamlessly switch what was on the main stage and what was on one of our back stages to either stream without bringing any streams offline and without having to bring anything offline. So it was a really good production setup on that side of things, but cost an extra few $100s, and basically was an extra like 3 or 4 hours of setup time. So that was kind of like a problem. Let's see, what else? Obviously, I mean, we didn't have, like, we had internet working, kind of, or we had internet working for the most part on Thursday when we went home for the night. They kicked us out at midnight, which was kind of upsetting. That the venue kicked us out so early. We weren't able to set up as much as we wanted. So we got in Friday morning to bring stuff live, and we didn't have internet turned on to our League of Legends room or our production area. So we had no internet for our production gear when we were supposed to go live, and the venue just basically didn't get back to us, didn't get us an IT person to turn on the internet to those ports in the building until about 5 or 6 hours after we were supposed to go live. So day one was really rough because of that, especially since like we had it working and it was like tested and working like Thursday night, and then we come in Friday morning, all the ports are turned off, and we're just like, well, you know, we got on the phone with many people. Like the only way we got someone out is by threatening to sue, because it was in our contract with the venue that they were supposed to provide internet service for the duration of our event. Right. We're like, look, guys, event's going on. We have no internet. Like, you're breaking contract here. So they wanted their money, and they finally decided to send someone out. And when he got there, his excuse was, oh, yeah, I just didn't get around to it, which was the most awesome excuse I've ever heard.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead. I
mean, like, day one was rough because of that. It was really rough. It was one of those deals where, like, we didn't have internet, you know, when we were supposed to at the venue, and League of Legends was really severely delayed by that. Starcraft was delayed by that. The people who were running, like, stream production didn't understand everything that was going on day one. And at the end of day one, like, I actually, like, screamed at people. Like, I literally screamed at people for, like, half an hour. And then, like, day two, people understood how production works, and then they were much better about it. But, I mean, we had issues with the microphones that we had. We had HC280s, which are the headphones I'm wearing here, but we had the broadcast headset versions, the same ones that MLG uses, IPL, all these, you know, big companies. So we had, like, really good gear. But the microphones on those are quite sensitive. They pick up a lot of noise. They pick up a lot of background noise. They sound beautiful, though, and that's why we're using them. So we had production staff in the back rooms talking a little bit too loud, too close to the casters, and it was getting picked up. We actually had someone say a stream password that went out on air, which was, like, really bad, because then we had to, like, change the password and bring streams offline. But, like, the thing for me is that, like, Blizzard Entertainment called me on the phone and was like, "Hey, Gwyn, we just heard your stream password on air. You should fix that." And I was just like, "What?" You know, it was one of those moments for me. So I like literally flipped a bitch, and I like walked into the production and just started flipping tables when we were all done for the day. So it was like really, people didn't understand they had to be like no talking. People didn't understand they weren't allowed to hang out in the production area. No, it's just for production and casters. That's it. You want to take a break or something, you go outside. Do not eat in there. And so it was really rough day one. Like day one was a pretty big clusterfuck. And that's kind of what happens when you take a whole bunch of volunteers who aren't getting paid, they've never done production before, you're using a completely untested production setup that like we designed like on the fly right before that.
That sounds like an IEM event.
So. Oh.
Just joking, just joking.
McCall, you can jump in whenever you want. By the way, all these topics are open.
And then
open
I mean,
discussion.
not having internet as well for like the first 6 hours of the day, like that was rough. We didn't have anywhere near the number of assets that we were supposed to have from everywhere from like sponsors to art assets for the stream, etc., etc. And it was just one of those things of like when you don't have budget to pay people, you end up in situations where it's like, oh, can you please do this art asset for us? And if someone is like, no, I just don't have time, then they just don't have time, and you just don't have an art asset. So, yeah, it was kind of rough. Day one was. Day two was a million times better. Literally a million times better. We had internet the whole day. Good games all around. The round robin with 6-person groups was like a really good format because it forced like a ton of tension, especially with top 4 advancing. It made that like down to the last match it was being decided, and I don't think that was communicated well enough to the audience how close those were as to who is going to make it out of the group. Like unless you lost like all 3 of your games day one, you pretty much still were like down to the last match to make it out on day two. So I really liked that. I really liked the round robin format with the 6-person groups. I thought it worked out beautifully. The games were really good. Like we had some ridiculous games, just like a TBT that was like an hour, 10 minutes, and 6 seconds long, for instance. Which because of that now like 2 casters owe Ghost Claw Korean barbecue because he bet it was going to be longer than an hour and 10 minutes at like the 10-minute mark in the game. Yeah, like great bet, right? But yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where day 2 was very, very smooth. Things ran beautifully. Day 3, Riot decided to patch their servers, which broke North American League of Legends, which was going to be okay because we're like, oh, we'll just use the tournament client. And then we got on the tournament client, and spectator mode for the tournament client was broken. So then, like, we actually didn't have spectators in our games. So all the casters for League that we had, like, standing around had nothing to do all of day 3, rather, on Sunday. So that was kind of rough. Like, that was very suboptimal. To have League of Legends have so many issues because League of Legends was really our big stream numbers. So yeah, it was definitely one of those things that could have gone better from that standpoint. Starcraft overall, the viewer numbers were just abysmal. Like literally, they were just ridiculously terrible. And I know that DreamHack was going on at the same time, but we actually didn't overlap with DreamHack that much because DreamHack is in Europe. We're on the west coast of the United States, right? It's literally like opposite ends of the globe, right? So what I told people when people were like, oh, isn't that the same weekend of DreamHack? I was like, yes, it just means you have to watch 23 hours every day of the weekend of StarCraft content.
Right.
So
you're right. Like, DreamHack wasn't overlapping by much, but there are other things happening, right? And after a lot of talk, especially on on State of the Game where Azale was on, right, one of your casters for the event.
Yep.
And he mentioned a lot of things on there, right? He mentioned a lot of DDoSing, right, which has been addressed by Destiny since then, and then just a lot of little things. Idra actually saying that he purposely streamed, like, to actually hurt y'all's viewer numbers
during the Muslim match, even.
Yeah,
it just didn't make sense.
I mean, talk to us about. I mean, you and John can talk to us a little bit about that. I mean,
so like if you want to get into kind of like how the event was kind of pushed under by the powers that be, like that's a really long conversation. But I think it kind of just starts with organizations that we thought might be able to help us out as a grassroots event, basically quoting us kind of ridiculous prices on things, you know, just to be ornery about it. We had, you know, yeah, I mean, every time we were mentioned on a major show, Live on 3 and State of the Game before the event, our website, thegessel.com, was DDoSed for an hour period of time before the event went live, the duration event, and 3 hours later. And people will be like, well, GWIN, no, you just got hit with a lot of traffic. No, that's not the case. Like, I have a list of 10 million unique IPs. So unless we were getting hit by 10 million people trying to check out our site on every single port, not just web ports, on every single port, for like, you know, we're literally talking like 5 to 6 gigabytes a second of traffic taking down our site for the duration of both those mentions. And both those times they're like, yeah, check out this event, go to thegessel.com. And of course thegessel.com is down because it's been DDoS. So like that was really frustrating. It was getting taken down by a really big botnet, which was awesome, but it was like not just like your average run-of-the-mill botnet. This was like a huge botnet. It's kind of one of the ones that, you know, if you're into that whole circle, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not, then you won't. But you can hire a botnet if you want. You can go out and you can hire one. Some Chinese companies will be glad to rent you out a botnet to DDoS targets if you want. It costs about $500 per time to do what they did to our site. So someone
encouraging people to do it.
So what I'm saying is that someone dropped like $1,000 to $1,500 to deny this event exposure on State of the Game and Live on 3.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. So if Destiny's fans pooled money to do that, then they did that. I personally don't think that Destiny's fans pooled money to take down our site for the duration of Live on 3 and the duration of State of the Game. I think that it was too well timed and too well executed to be a whole bunch of guys on Reddit. Doesn't make sense to me. I think it was an organization deciding to take the event down. So there was that. Then we had the situation where we started having players like drop out, like players we'd confirmed drop out. And we're like, why are you guys dropping out? And they're like, oh, we heard you guys don't actually have the money and you're not going to pay out your prize pool. And the whole thing's a scam. And we're like, what? What? And they're like, yeah, sorry, I've heard from like multiple sources in the industry that are more reliable than you that this is what's happening. I'm like, do you want me to like screenshot the bank account and send it to you? Like, no, I'm just not going to come anymore. And so someone or some people in the industry, more prestigious than myself, which is pretty much everyone, but was calling the players who were confirmed for the event and telling them we didn't have the money, we weren't going to pay out. And we had players dropping out from that. Then we had spectators who had bought spectator passes, demanding refunds on the spectator passes, and this is like weeks before the event was happening, saying, oh, we heard the event was canceled from reliable sources, it wasn't actually going to happen, so we're not going anymore. And I was like, where are you getting this information? Oh, we can't tell you. We're just...
There were 80 people that bought spectator passes that didn't 80 or more that didn't end up coming at all. So they spent the money to buy the spectator passes and the event, you know, baggie that we were giving out that just didn't even come.
Yep. So
I know that's normal, but it's not. 80 just seems like a lot out of 300 and some.
Yeah, it does. So there was definitely sort of some of that sort of thing. We had another situation, and I mean I'll talk about it a little bit, where like Azael is the caster for EG. Like I like Azael as a person, and I like him as a caster. I think he's a really good caster. The way he was pushed on our event was not cool at all. Like, it really put us in a situation where, it put me in a financial situation where I had to spend a lot of money, which I didn't want to spend, because I was already spending a bunch of money putting the event on. But basically what it came down to is, after, well, we had confirmed Destiny as a caster for our event. Destiny was like, sure, I'd love to cast the event. Kingston went to Gigabyte. Kingston was one of our sponsors. Gigabyte was another sponsor. Kingston went to Gigabyte and said, Gigabyte, you cannot have Destiny cast. And
Wow.
Gigabyte says, hey, you can't have Destiny Cast. And we're like, but he's going to bring thousands of viewers into your event for StarCraft. This is a really good thing. They're like, no, Kingston, we'll pull out, and we'll pull out if you have Destiny Cast. And that
Wow.
there goes like
Okay.
our 2 title sponsors, right? So of course we have to go to Destiny and be like, look, dude, like this is the situation. And he's like, wow, fuck. And then, so that was that. And then of course we end up in a situation where like all of Destiny's fans are like mad at us because they're like, fuck the Gigabyte Esports land, you know, which sucked, right? It really hurt us in that way. It would have been better if like Gigabyte had said before we announced Destiny, hey, you can't use Destiny, but they there was no communication there. Like, we're like, these are the casters we're going to use. We would like to announce them, and we're like, oh yeah, that sounds great. And then after we announced Destiny, then Kingston goes to Gigabyte and says you can't use Destiny. So there was that. When Gigabyte started putting pressure on us to announce a big name caster, and I'm like, what are you talking about? I already have Doa. Doa's like a really big name caster. And they're like, no, we need a big name caster. And so Kingston goes to Gigabyte and says, hey, Gigabyte, we found you a big name caster. And Gigabyte's like, awesome. And they're like, it's E.G. Azale. And Gigabyte's like, awesome, because Gigabyte doesn't know StarCraft 2 casters.
Right.
And then Gigabyte comes to my sponsor contact, Bobby, and says, hey, Bobby, we found you a big name caster. And Bobby's like, awesome. It's like, oh, it's E.G. Azale. And Bobby's like, awesome, because Bobby doesn't know StarCraft 2. And Bobby calls me up, and he's like, hey, GWIN, we have a big name caster. And I'm like, who? And he's like, it's Azale. And I'm like, who? Oh, that EG guy who does Masters Cup. Sweet. Yeah, because I knew him from World of Warcraft. Like, I was a WoW player, right? So I knew him from WoW Arena. Like, he was one of the top warlocks. And then I knew him from casting for WoW as well. So I was like, this guy's sweet. You know? Like, I liked him, but I was like, okay. And then Bobby's like, oh, by the way, you need to pay him X dollar amount a day, put him up in a hotel, and give him a food stipend. And they're taking that out of our budget. And I was like, what the fuck just happened? Because all of a sudden, you know, my budget for casters got like $3,000 smaller, and I'm already paying Doa, I'm already paying the rest of my casters, and all of a sudden I don't have budget to do any of that. So either I have to go to all of my other casters, say, hey, by the way, guys, I can't pay you now, or I have to pay them out of my own pocket, which is what ended up happening.
Okay, so I guess so. When he got added on, you guys were already set because you know the first question is like, well, what about the budget?
We already had our 6 casters. Right. We had already budgeted to pay all of them. It was all said and done. Gigabyte comes in and says you have to use this guy because Kingston says you have to use this guy. You have to pay him this much, which, by the way, I'm not going to say the number, but it's way more than Doa was making. Azale was making more a day than any of the other casters except for Doa were making for the entire weekend.
And just to be clear, this is not anything on Azale.
No,
I think, yeah.
He was definitely a very, very professional and good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate that too, since I haven't said anything in regards to what you're talking about. But when I met him, he was a really good guy, and I was actually quite impressed. And when he showed up on Live on 3 a few days after, and stuck by the event. You know, as many problems as it did have, you know, he stuck by it, and I really appreciated that. But there was definitely
like I would have loved to have Azale as a caster for my event, but the way that he was brought into the event by Gigabyte and by Kingston was completely ridiculous, and the fact that they pushed him in on the event after our budget was set and then took money out of my budget to pay for him was completely uncalled for. So it put me in a situation where I had to pay, you know, and I still have to pay. I haven't paid him yet. I have to pay all my casters outside of Azale. Azale already got paid for, I'm sure, by Gigabyte. But the rest of my casters, I have to write them checks now. And I already spent $3,000 getting custom music written for the event, and I already spent thousands of dollars on equipment for the event, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it puts me in a situation where it's like, okay, now I have to spend, you know, another $2,000 paying people that I can't really afford to spend paying people. But I'm not going to be one of those people who in esports is so common is oh yeah, we'll pay you for that, and then you never see money, because I've been in that position. I am owed probably around $2,000 or $3,000 in payment for casting now that I guarantee you I'll never see, just because organizations are like, yeah, we'll pay you for this event, and then you show up and you cast it, and then you never get paid, and that's esports right now. But I'm not going to be that person. I have I have a job, and I'm willing to kind of put that on the line and help. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. That's the way I am. That's the way Hollywood is, at least.
Integrity. That's what it's called.
From.
So how far in advance was that? I mean, basically all this. Like how many days? Yeah, how many?
It was like the week before MLG. So like
okay, so 2
weeks out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was and basically like Bobby. Like I had two options when it happened, because Bobby told me, I was like, look, dude, I was like, if Gigabyte's going to do this, I'm not going to be part of this event anymore. I was like, you have to let Gigabyte know that they lost their director of production, or sorry, their executive producer, me. They lost all their production equipment because 90% of it was mine. You've lost your stream producer because that was one of my people that I had hired and was paying for. You've lost, all the rest of your casters, because I'm going to tell all the rest of the casters pull out. So you're going to have Doa, you're going to have Azael. They're going to duo cast 2 Starcraft streams simultaneously for 3 days straight. And Bobby's like, well, I can't say that to Gigabyte because then they'll just pull out of the event completely. And I'm like, well, that's what's going to happen. And so literally up until the day of the event, like the day before the event, I was considering at the very last minute pulling everything out and just killing the event. Like, that was because of what happened. Like, I was so upset. I was literally like fuming every single minute of every single day that like this had happened. I was really, really mad about it. So, I mean, you can say, okay, well, GWIN, how did this happen? But really how it happened is that, Kingston decided that, Destiny wasn't going to cast our event, and then Kingston decided that Azael was at this price. And they forced it on the event. So, and then you have the wonderfulness of Greg Fields, Idra, posting, and I have a fucking picture of this on my desktop that I haven't sent to Kingston yet, but I'm going to. You have Idra posting, during DeMuslim playing and Azael casting, I only have 5 times as many viewers as the Gessel. Come watch me, please. Links is what's his face. And then when he got confronted about that on, I think it was State of the Game after, he's like, oh, I was pissed off that they invited Honori and not me. That is fucking bullshit. Okay? That is fucking bullshit. You want to know? You want to know what happened? We went to EG and we said, we want our first pick out of your player lineup is Idra. Our second pick out of your player lineup is Huck. And then we went down the list of what players we wanted, all right? But our first pick was Idra. Our second pick was Huck. EG said Idra's going to DreamHack. Huck is going to be at DreamHack as well. And they went down the list, and like, we went down the list, and they're like, you can have DeMuslim and Machine. And I'm like, great. We've got 2 good players in here. But Idra was our first pick from EG. So the fact that he's like, oh, well, they picked Honori over me. No, that is bullshit. He was our first pick from EG to have at our event. What, did he go to DreamHack? No. He was home streaming the whole time.
Yeah, sounds like, I don't know. Sounds like there's
Kingston HyperX player. Yeah. Why is a Kingston HyperX player killing a Kingston HyperX sponsored event? Like, why?
It's just Idra being Idra.
Yeah,
all of us in here,
too.
all of us in here have dealt with him before. He's seriously just a jackass, but obviously that sort of attitude gets viewers and gets people to tune in, and it is what it is. I mean, every sport has jackasses, and he just happens to be the one in StarCraft, one of them.
So I don't know. I mean, you can say that the event failed because execution was bad, and I will agree with you that there were a lot of issues on the execution side, especially day one. And there are a million things we can do better. A million things.
Yeah, but that's only on the side of what viewers saw online. Yeah. From the sponsor standpoint, the event was actually very successful, and I just got off the phone with Irene from Gigabyte yesterday, actually. Oh. And at the end of it, she was very very excited about us meeting the numbers that we did for the event. And for them, it was never about the stream numbers. And
No,
unfortunately, there's too many people.
live numbers.
Yeah, and there's too many people in the StarCraft 2 community that think it's all about the stream numbers. And there's actually teams and organizations that think that too. And we're going to end up going down a slippery slope. You know, and Carmac might disagree with me, but we've been down this road before, where it becomes all about media. And when it does, you know, and somebody else comes up with some new idea or some jackass gets a lot more viewers, then we all end up losing. So for them, it was about people at the event, and for them, it was a success. They were very happy with it. So, I mean, they gave out $30,000 in prizing.
Yeah, that's sick.
To, you know,
They
roughly
actually like the giveaways were actually ridiculous. Like for those people tuning in who maybe haven't you know, or didn't tune in, didn't see any of that, they literally would like have up on stage like 8 or 9 $250 computer cases, a couple i7 processors, a whole bunch of $100 headsets, a whole bunch of RAM, a whole bunch of SSDs, you know, cooling stuff like water coolers, air coolers, all this stuff, and then you just start calling out raffle numbers. And it wasn't like, oh, you get a headset. It was, no, here's a headset and 16 gigs of RAM in the form of 2 8-gig sticks. Oh, here's an SSD and a computer case. Here's an i7. You know, it's just like ridiculous the amount of gear they gave away. And it was like twice a day. They gave out like 15 grand worth of gear, felt like.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, that's
The
pretty
giveaways
nuts.
were actually ridiculous. Like, they were just batshit insane.
Right.
But yeah, I was really, really upset after the event. Like, just with how it went. I mean, it literally felt like, you know, the powers
Slap
that
in the
be,
face.
the powers that be had decided that the event was going to fail from like a StarCraft 2 side of things, and they had done their best to make it fail. And I would say that, from my opinion, they succeeded in making the online viewership just super, super low, and doing everything they could to try and keep that as small and as diminutive as possible. So I was really, really upset about that, and I was like, you know, if this is the way that this industry is going to be, then maybe I don't want to be part of it at all. But, you know, I spent some time thinking and reflecting on whether I was just going to say fuck esports and like leave after this event, which is where I was leaning. And I spent some time talking to some other, you know, really successful people, not in esports, like in completely other fields. And what I got out of that is that if you're truly passionate about something, it's worth fighting for, and it's worth, you know, really kind of putting it in, and that, you know, you're always going to hit resistance in any field you decide to become a part of, and whether you turn tail or whether you have the stomach for the fight really kind of decides who you are as a person. And the other thing I learned is that, or the other thing that was kind of pointed out to me, is that obviously we were enough of a threat to warrant that response, and that's something to be proud of, that we were enough of a threat to warrant that response out of the old boys club that runs StarCraft 2. And if that's the way that it's going to be, if they see, you know, the production capacity that I have as a person, and they see these mid-tier events as a threat, and they especially saw ours as a threat, that's something to be proud of, man. That's something to put under my belt, walk around with, and be like, I'm a threat.
Speaking of speaking of the old boys club, we should probably shift gears and talk to Carmac here from the great Electronic Sports League. How's that sound?
Let's do it.
I mean, that is a heck of a story, dude.
Yeah, I hope, man, I hope that's some crazy stories right there, man, or crazy happenings, because I hope that doesn't happen in the future, because that's real. You know, like how can we grow esports if you know, if events like the GSL are gonna get, you know, torn down, basically.
Well, it will happen. It will happen again, and it will probably. It's definitely happened before. So it's just unfortunate.
Yeah.
It's like playing politics.
Mm-hmm.
Right. All right, John, you wanna take the topics?
Yeah,
for the call here?
let's start here.
Let's try
Mikhail here.
Hold on.
You ready? What?
Just to get something straight.
Okay.
The Old Esports Boys Club is RedEye, you, DJ Wheat, Sir Scoots. I'm still young.
All right. Okay. What's RedEye up to these days?
He hosts events, actually. He does a lot of work with us, together with us. He did quite magnificently at the UK World Championship Series for Blizzard, which was produced by ESL UK. He does a lot of hosting in general with us together, so you'll be seeing a lot of him, I hope.
It's good that he's still in it. I really like that guy, except for his RedEye rankings that he did a while back. But
I actually I have to say that RedEye, out of all the commentators that there are, he's the most similar in style and the air that he gives away, kind of in his commentary, to the Premier League casters in England. He's the most TV-like guy, which doesn't really make him necessarily the best, but he's the closest guy to what I know from television from the Premier League.
very cool, very cool. Well, Carmac, here's the deal. Everyone wants to know a little bit about you. So it's not that you have done these interviews before, but there's probably a lot of people tuning in from the Starcraft community that really don't know who you are. So if you don't mind just giving us a little history of yourself in esports.
So,
To start, huh?
yeah, so just it's a long story. I'm going to try to make it short, as short as possible. I was a video game nerd that really loved video games and was fascinated by stuff like competing in virtual reality against other people and things like that. I really got myself addicted to Unreal Tournament and a couple of other games, and really long story short, I was the nerd with an opinion. I like to argue with people on forums, and I found a website which where the UT players from the US used to hang out, and suddenly I started writing for excessreality.com, which turned into ES Reality. I pissed a couple of people off, like Angel from the CPL. I got picked up. I got, I was standing out because of that. I wasn't better than anyone else. I was just more of an asshole than anyone else, I guess. And the GGL picked me up, gave me a job, taught me how to do my job better than I was doing. I was doing it as a hobby, like for probably 3 years without getting paid or even hoping to get paid, just because it was my hobby. I was doing stuff for GGL as a journalist, then for SK Gaming, and then I switched to ESL to manage the Intellect Stream Masters. I hope everyone's not asleep by now. Hasn't fallen asleep by now, so it's
10:30, right?
Yeah, but the story's boring.
The story's boring. Okay.
Tell us a little bit, real quick. I was supposed to go on to, to the next topic, but tell us a little bit about some of the differences, real quick, between the different large organizations that you've worked at, as far as gaming leagues go. What are some of the differences? What was the difference between what your experience at GGL and your experience now?
Okay, so one thing to be said is that what people don't really. I don't think people really know that, but the GGL has actually managed to assemble a fantastic, awesome crew of really talented people. I mean, they had DJ Wheat working for them. They had Rance working for them. They had, who else? RedEye working with them. They had Tosspot. They had many different, really talented people. And, Live on 3, well, it didn't necessarily start right there, but that was the first proper esports/gaming podcast that I'm aware of. A lot of things that GGL did was actually ahead of its time.
Well, we say that now, but back then, boy, we were looking at it like this is the dumbest, stupidest shit. Some of it, like the Hip Hop Gaming League and
Hip Hop Gaming League is
awesome.
Look it up.
Completely different thing. Yeah. So GGL did a thing. I have no idea who came up with it, but just to promote gaming and the idea of competitive gaming, they got rappers and DJs and celebrities from that realm basically to play. I believe NBA Live against each other, and Snoop Dogg was the commish of the league. So that
Really?
idea was really controversial in esports, but I think I don't know what the financing was and where it came from, but if there was a sponsor willing to pay for that project, why not? I mean, it's
Well, I think at the time some of us thought, man, this just seems really dumb. But when you look back on it, like you said, they were ahead of their time. A lot of things that GGL was doing with we and Rants and all of those guys on epileptic gaming and whatnot was really ahead of its time. I mean, boy, could you imagine if we'd had Twitch 5 years ago?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm not necessarily saying that we need the Hip Hop Gaming League back. That's certainly not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if there was money for a publicity stunt like that, and somebody was willing to pay for it, why not? If you don't like it, just ignore it. It's not like, suddenly somebody wanted to get everyone to play Starcraft 2 on slow or normal speed, not fast. So. Yeah, long story short, it was a really, really cool company that I think did a couple of things wrong and started doing things too ambitiously and too early, and which is why, there's only 2 people in the world still wearing GGL wear. So
it's hot as shit too. It's long sleeve black shirt and it's like 80 degrees in my room. What the hell was I thinking?
No, but it's really good quality stuff. I mean, it still looks nice, and it's nice and comfortable.
Does yours say the "Stop playing with yourself" on the back?
Oh my god.
Mine does.
That was actually the slogan, but then Intel said, "Hey guys,
oh come on, come on, really?"
Yeah.
That's such a good
I mean,
slogan right there.
it does have quite a sexual connotation. So
You think?
I don't blame them. But differences between the GGL and the ESL. Well, the ESL, for starters, is a different company in the sense that it was built from the ground up. It started as the German league of esports and grew from there, without trying to do anything too radical, so to speak, something like that. So, in the sense that they didn't come in 2002 and decide, hey, let's run a $10 million event series, let's do all this stuff, let's hire Snoop Dogg, Robbie Williams, and Justin Timberlake to host all these matches and stupid stuff like that. They got to where they are really step by step. And I have to say I'm a big proponent of that approach.
Okay, so not looking back anymore, but kind of looking forward, I guess. What were some of the challenges? Well, I guess it kind of is looking back, but since joining ESL, what are some of the challenges and experiences that you've had, with ESL?
So. Just a couple of things to say. I started working for ESL after having worked, I was an island, kind of, within the companies that I worked for. At GGL, I worked from Poland, so I was just popping up articles here and there and doing interviews and stuff, but I really wasn't working in any sort of team that would be bigger than 3 people. SK Gaming, that was pretty much the same thing. So long story short, I basically had no frigging idea how to work in a bigger group of people. And there I go into a company which has 7 different departments or whatever the number is, 120 people or so that work, and a project which takes place, in Asia, Europe, several different countries in Europe, North America. You have to work with Intel, you have to work with an overseas agency, a couple of other sponsors, and you have to manage a project to which 7 different departments at your company, contribute. That was, fairly. That was fairly rough, I have to say, to transition into that, to understand which buttons to push to make sure that the wheels don't fall off. That was quite challenging. Luckily, product manager is theoretically responsible for everything and for nothing. So if I, let's say, disappear for a quarter of a year, theoretically, nothing happens. The German machine keeps working. That's how Germans are, wired. So luckily I wasn't in a position where I could mess things up.
All right. Obviously, you're still with ESL, so the experience has obviously been pretty good, I would say, correct?
Well, I have to say, as with every company, there are problems and there are upsides, and you stay if the upsides outweigh the problems, right? So I have to say that I really, it's been the most challenging professionally period of my life. I've learned a great deal of things. I've done things which I never thought I would do. It's, absolutely monumental stuff. When you actually, finish an Intel Extreme Masters season, you really get filled with a sense of accomplishment. It only hits you after you've completed it that, you've done something really, really big and monumental. Obviously, it's not just me doing that. It's, 100 people doing that in the company. And I just take all the credit, but
Well, talk about that part of it a little bit, because a lot of people don't. I mean, I know because I've worked at ESL as well, and I've looked at the company as a whole. But talk a little bit about what the difference is between ESL, MLG, NASL. People don't realize that there's a huge difference. That ESL is much larger, much bigger. They have a much more sustainable model, at least in my opinion. But I think a lot of people just see these large events, and so they just see, okay, ESL is IEM, MLG is all of their big events, and NASL is their big events and leagues. Well, what is the difference for people that may not have been to the ESL website, the 15 different websites that they have, for different countries or whatever, but explain a little bit to people what the biggest difference is between ESL and some of these other leagues.
I'm not going to, name any leagues, and I might be wrong. I may have not done my homework properly, so I'll just talk about ESL. ESL is a grassroots organization. More than it's not just Intel Extreme Masters. Intel Extreme Masters is just the cherry on top. And there's a huge, huge pyramid below it. Just to give you a sense of the scope, I may butcher the number, but I'll be close. I think there are 3.5 million registered users in ESL. Actually, my wife is saying in the background over 4 million by now. We've got ESL Brazil, we've got ESL in the US, ESL in the UK, in the Nordics, Spain, France, Poland, China, Southeast Asia, the Russian region, the CIS region. Some countries are stronger. They have lots of great live events, and they produce fantastic live events also for partners like Riot and Blizzard. Other countries just have online presence, but overall we are pretty much frigging everywhere, and it's for us just we've broadcast Intel Extreme Masters, the finals, in 9 different languages, and it was really a piece of cake for us, simply because we have so many connections in so many different countries. So the scope of the ESL is gigantic, I would say. Not many people know that we've got amateur cups, and the Go for League of Legends series is the single largest one-day cup on Earth, known to me, with I think 5,000 people participating. We have a 1,024-team bracket for that, so we're just doing tons and tons of really lots of amateur stuff, and the team at ESL, one floor above me, is developing Versus. It's a technology which is a matchmaking technology similar to something that you would see, let's say, in a League of Legends client, except it's game agnostic, so you can play a web game called Hacksball, Counter-Strike Source, and then switch to Starcraft 2 and be ranked across the ESL in all of these three or separately in these. So just tons of stuff that ESL does, and Intel Extreme Masters is the cherry that attracts all the attention.
Right. Right.
So, Carmac, in your opinion, what's the future, or what's the game that's going to take esports to the next level, or what genre of games, or what is it?
It depends. It really depends on how you would define the next level. Define next
point.
level, and then I'll respond to you.
Next level meaning, how do we get it mainstream? I guess, like.
It's something that I really dislike, the idea how do we get mainstream, because there's been attempts. We just get mainstream by multiplying the number of esports fans in using grassroots approaches rather than, there's been a project called Championship Gaming Series where some genius came up with the idea that if you simplify everything so that John Clark's grandmother understands the show, it's going to be epically amazing. But they kind of forgot the fact that, there's a big part. Simplicity isn't really necessary. I mean, take a look at Starcraft. Starcraft is not really a simple game. Or take a look at League of Legends. We had 267,000 people watching one single match, which is the single largest one-match audience known to me. In all of esports. Again, I might have, wrong information, but is League of Legends complicated to watch? It's extremely complicated to watch, right? But still, we have the single largest audience that we've ever noted at ESL. So simplicity is not the key here. Relevance is the key. So I've been saying that in interviews for years now, that we need a really, really mainstream game that really appeals to a ton of people that, that just go out for lunch somewhere in Manhattan and they're going to know about StarCraft and they've played StarCraft, and then they suddenly see a StarCraft broadcast and they're going to be like, wow, I completed the campaign and these siege tanks, interesting use of these siege tanks, this type of stuff. So the interesting thing, actually, which is something I noticed with some of my friends, is esports is becoming a father and son type of thing, actually. Which, the people that started playing video games like 10 years ago, our fathers didn't really play StarCraft 2 with us. They weren't teaching us StarCraft 2. Now we see, DJ Wheat teaching Mini Wheat to play StarCraft, or I see a friend of mine teaching his son to play. And they kind of, these kids actually grow up with esports and they understand esports. And, when I hear stories that the sons of George Wu, the Intel Extreme Masters manager on Intel side, our main sponsor, the sons of George Wu just go to school and brag about oh, my daddy's running Intel Extreme Masters, and all the kids think that these young George's Wu sons are the coolest kids ever. I mean, that really shows us that we're getting there, but it's a slow process. We're not just boom, one TV show, great, we're there. It's something that we really to work on a grassroots level, where first of all we need a really, really mainstream game that is really big, and then we need an infrastructure that supports esports in a way where we keep delivering new stars. I mean, there needs to be a 16-year-old kid that will come to an event, come to an Intel Extreme Masters event or any other event, and he will beat the crap out of Stefano while Stefano is still in his prime. Well, we've had in esports for years and years and years. Take a look at StarCraft Brood War and all these foreign stars in esports. We had, the guys that went to Korea. Every next guy that went to Korea was worse than the previous one. We never managed, as a community, to produce champions that would come up and be better than the current ones. We always had to settle for the second best, and then the third best, and then the fourth best, as the first best, second best, and third best respectively just decided to quit and stop playing. We never saw a situation where a game was 3 years old, and there was a the new guy coming up and raping the hell out of the current champion. It's very, very rare in esports, and it's because more people get out of the scene than come into it, which is sad, and which is something that we really need to fix before we really get mainstream.
Well, when you say, and you said it earlier, I think, but fixing that really involves creating an infrastructure from the bottom up, as opposed to putting all of our eggs in one basket and concentrating on the top-down approach. Do you agree, or do you see a kind of a combination of that?
I mean, we have a ton of people last season in Intel Extreme Masters complaining, and Intel Extreme Masters is still the top-down type of thing, but we're trying to make it as grassroots as possible. People complaining that the lineup of players competing in our events was like, man. But I have a list somewhere written down. Let me try if I can do it from memory. Last Gamescom, 13 months ago, we had the White Ra, Show, Hey Pro, and probably like 7, 8 different top European players who are known to every single guy on Reddit. They got knocked out in the qualification. Sure, we could, we can put up a prize purse, open up an email inbox, and say, hey guys, look, we're going to invite everyone that's good, and the rest of you there you go. That's something I personally really hate. I know that our numbers are suffering in terms of streaming, because obviously do I want to have Stefano, White Ra, and Idra at every single one of my events? Sure I do, they're famous, but I personally genuinely think that if they lose to BCQT, if they lose to Feast, if they lose to Slivko, if they lose to Tarson in the online qualification, then they shouldn't be there. We're a sports league, we're not a TV show. So, and we've proved, the one player we can take credit for is Feast, 18-year-old Belgian kid who's still in high school. He got 4th place at the Intel Extreme Masters World Championship, beating 2 really high-level, high-ranked Koreans. And he came up through 5 qualifiers to get to Kiev, 5 qualifications. I think he had to beat like an insane number of opponents just to qualify for Kiev, and there he eliminated Hero from the tournament, who was fairly, recently DreamHack champion, so in really decent form. So I really have to say, even though I do know that people would rather see Stefano every single time, I'm not going to give them Stefano every single time. I'm going to give players like Illusion, Feast, and any other kid who's unknown and needs a chance. I'm going to give these guys a chance, because if we don't give these people a chance, we're going to keep watching the same guys, except older, in 3 years, and it's going to be boring.
And when they walk away from it, then the game dies. It's happened before.
Pretty much, yes. I mean, obviously, Starcraft is the biggest esports we've ever seen, probably, in terms of the number of players and things like that. But you already see some of the players that have a sponsorship, have a team paying for their flights and things like that, they keep playing. But the next guy below him plays less, just because he doesn't have that sponsorship and doesn't have anyone that would pay for his flight to, Cologne, Sweden, somewhere, or Korea. And we need to keep giving these guys chances, because we're going to run out of champions.
Right. That's why
it's not a problem for today. It's not a problem for 2014. It's a problem for slightly longer down the road.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I agree 100%. I don't know about anyone else. I don't really care, but
yeah. I mean, I think we're all in the same boat when it comes to that. I mean, I think a lot of us have gotten tired of seeing the same folks, especially in MLG arenas and stuff, right? I mean, it's the same Koreans. It's not even foreigners. It's like mostly Koreans, right? So on top of that, it's like it's not even our players. It's
and that brings up something interesting, Carmac, because you had to make a tough decision a couple years back. And the decision was Quake Live viable to IEM anymore? Do you want to touch base on that a little bit? Like, because that was a very controversial decision. That was tough. I mean, Quake Live is arguably the granddaddy of all esports, or Quake at least. And here IEM, who had supported Quake from the very beginning, was now making a decision.
No, Quake was in Intel Extreme Masters for 2 seasons, in season 4 and 5.
Okay.
But the problem was really that when we picked it up, it was my decision. When we picked up Quake Live, I thought we needed a game which would be entertaining for any random guy. It was kind of the bridge between World of Warcraft community and Counter-Strike community, because let's face it, Quake Live is enjoyable. Even if you don't play it, it's enjoyable to watch to pretty much anyone. So you can watch it while waiting for your semi-final to happen, something like that. And it really worked well at trade shows, where people could also enjoy the game. Obviously, if you're a Starcraft 2 fan, you want to see Starcraft 2, but if there's a break in the schedule, you will stick around and watch Quake Live. This was kind of for that reason. The simplicity of Quake Live, the coolness, I wanted to add a really cool aspect for inside Intel Extreme Masters. But then StarCraft 2 came around, and it does exactly the same thing that I wanted Quake Live to do. It's easy to sit down and pick up. I mean, I had a fantastic conversation with the president of BenQ for South America, who came to Brazil and watched the event, and I was explaining StarCraft to him, and I spent like 5 minutes explaining the basic concepts, and I was saying, okay, so now all that Dimasim is doing, he's trying to, make sure that he expands while the opponent is not expanding, therefore his economy will kick in. And the guy finished my sentence for me, He finished my sentence, he said, I get it, it's all economy. He added 2 + 2. It's that type of game which you can easily, if you spend 5 minutes watching it, you can easily understand it's complex, but on the surface, the general idea of StarCraft is relatively simple to get. So when StarCraft came around, it did the job Quake Live was doing, and unfortunately Quake Live became this game where 2.5 guys competed for first place every time, which is not something that's good as a show.
Correct. So there was part of it was it needed to be good for the show, which was the IEM Extreme Masters, but it also had to be a viable game that could last longer than just 1 season, correct?
Yes, I mean, as a rule of thumb, if a game stops delivering new top players, it's a dying game.
Do you worry that that's happening in StarCraft?
No, not yet. It's not a problem this year, and it's not going to be a problem next year. And it's probably not going to be a problem as long as they keep releasing the expansions, because new people will always buy the game, new people will always get into the into Battle.net and start playing the game and try to compete. It's a question of how do we foster these people to stay on Battle.net and try to ladder up and beat the Idras and the Stefanos and STs of this world. And we're not doing that really, not well enough. None of us.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you think is the lifespan of StarCraft? Even when Heart of the Swarm does come out, it's not going to be 100% of the folks coming back to StarCraft that was here, during like beta and release of StarCraft, right? And it's kind of getting to the fundamental issue with esports, which is our sport is it's a product for another company, right? And their product releases, the sport is not like basketball, which is it's a simple game that stays consistent forever. Like there are little tweaks here and there to the rules, but for the most part, the game is the game, right? And you can build infrastructure around that game. You can build industry around that game. But with us, if you're talking about StarCraft, you're talking about League of Legends. These stars, these players, for the most part, I mean, it only lasts as long as the game lasts, right? And
well,
go ahead.
It's an inbuilt problem that any game that's released as a Christmas present has. No one's buying Brood War these days. So where is Brood War supposed to get new players? unless it becomes a really mainstream activity where the marketing is driven by the actual esports show, which has mainstream attention, and thus people actually get into Brood War and play it like it is in Korea. You're never going to get, like, who's buying Brood War these days outside of Korea? No one. Really no one. So where are we supposed to get new champions for Brood War? It's going to happen sooner or later to Starcraft. Obviously it's going to happen several years along the way, that people will stop getting into the scene unless Blizzard finds a good business reason to actually support esports. Right now they are supporting esports on the kind of belief that there is value behind it, and there is a ton of value behind it, but there is not a direct correlation between Blizzard spending this and this much on the World Championship Series and Blizzard selling this and this many boxes of Starcraft. There's not a direct correlation. So, and we have to be grateful as a community, as a Starcraft community. We have to be really grateful to Starcraft, to Blizzard, that they actually are putting this effort, because without belief, it's tough to justify at this point. It's easier to justify investing into esports for a game like Dota or League of Legends or Blizzard All-Stars, which will be a free-to-play game, which will rely on microtransactions. But a game which is on a in the model where you ship it in a box, a guy buys it once, and then you never have to care about this guy because you sold the game to him. He's not going to buy another box of the game, right? So you promote the game once, you release it before Christmas or whatever the hell the release time is, and then you forget about the game. And we're really, really, really lucky that there is a company like Blizzard that wants to keep supporting a title they've released a really long time ago because they believe in esports, but they haven't built a business case behind esports yet, which is worrying.
Right. No. Agreed. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if we ever get to a point where StarCraft, the only changes to StarCraft, instead of coming out with a brand new one like StarCraft 3 and 4 and 5, it just stays StarCraft except for like graphics updates and stuff like that. But the game itself doesn't change, right? I mean,
they need to learn to make money out of the current player base that's playing StarCraft actively.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how. I have a couple of ideas, but as Joker said in The Dark Knight, if you're good at something, don't do it for free.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is esports though. A lot of people do a lot of things for free.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. So, League of Legends, for example, or a Dota or any other game, it's got a better chance for longevity simply because of the different business model. You download the game and theoretically you can spend an infinite amount of money in League of Legends. To some degree, there are limitations, but theoretically you can keep spending money, and Riot Games can keep making money out of the same John Clark or out of the same Idra for years and years to come. Whereas once Blizzard has made money off of Idra, where Idra bought a box of, a collector's edition of StarCraft, he's not buying any more StarCraft stuff. Blizzard is not making money on Idra anymore, or on any other player that bought StarCraft already. Right. If they fix that, then StarCraft has a really, 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 really good shot at being, a long-standing esports title. It will be a long-standing esports title, but it's not going to be infinite.
Ideas
unless it becomes mainstream.
Ideas on business models for StarCraft. Like, can y'all think of any? I mean, in-game transactions. I can't even what would you buy?
I mean, one of the things like monetizing a game like that through a microtransaction is there's a few ways to go about it. I actually used to work as a producer for a free-to-play video game company, so that was my job, was monetizing the title. And I mean, it comes down to a couple things. Like, you can sell advantages in the actual gameplay. That's very hard to do well without unbalancing things, but you can sell. It's kind of like buying a Riot champion, right? There's a way to get it without paying for it. It takes a lot of time, but if you want to get it faster, you can just simply purchase it. So I do think that selling permanent items is like a terrible idea from a business standpoint. Like you sell a Riot champion once. No, you should have to like buy that Riot champion for maybe 99 cents a month, you know, and you get that. So at the end of each month, you get to decide whether you want to rebuy that champion. The other thing you can sell, obviously, is cosmetic things, and I think that's probably where a company like Blizzard would go. Be like, oh, you want your Thor to look totally different and awesome? Well, yeah, that's going to be, you know, $1 or whatnot, and you can get a skin that totally changes.
What about the EG flag hanging over your base?
Yeah, like if you're on Team EG and or if you're a fan of EG and you wanted an EG flag on your command center, you could totally do that.
I don't think it's going to make them enough money, though.
Yeah, it has to be.
I really don't.
It has to be part of the actual game. Like, it has to be, you know, it's kind of like League, right? You're talking about League. I mean, there are things that, you know, buying a champion or buying runes, I mean, that has direct influence on the game. So
right, and that's what I'm saying. Like, if you sell like you get a level 4 of all your upgrades instead of just 3 levels of all your upgrades, like that makes a direct influence on the game, right? But that's like a balance issue, so you have to be super careful about doing that. I mean, obviously you're going to assume that all the pros have that, but at a lower level, that's one of those things that definitely could unbalance the game. Someone gets level 4 mech attack.
I don't think that's the way to go to give people advantages in the game. I don't think that's the way to go at all. Simply because I don't think, knowing Blizzard, I don't think they would even consider it fair.
They won't do it.
They would never do such a thing. And in League of Legends, it's very well thought out, where it's very well balanced, and you're actually paying to speed up some things in the game rather than. I mean, in order to an average playing person like me for League of Legends, in order to purchase a new champion, I have to play 3 weeks. New champion releases are more or less 2 weeks, which is genius, right? I'm never going to keep up with the game.
Yeah.
What I think Blizzard should really monetize, though, is probably competitions on Battle.net, where you can win back stuff. Any Bronze Leaguer can be seeded into a Bronze League Cup, and he can win, you know, Blizzard points or whatever, and for those Blizzard points he can, you know, do random stuff, and you can buy these Blizzard points or win these Blizzard points by competing. If you want to compete on a higher level, you have to pay an entry fee with Blizzard points, but the rewards are already better. And on the Grandmaster level, let's say if you win a Grandmaster Battle.net Cup, you get to go to an IEM event, for example, something like that.
Right.
And then people would keep paying these entry fees to these cups, but there needs to be a big system well thought out with incentives and things like that.
Right.
And it's I don't even know how many people play on the Battle.net and if it's a viable business model actually, because I can let's assume Battle.net is so huge, so let's do microtransactions as, you know, tickets. You can play in the league, in the ladder, but you can play in the cups as well, and there's going to be 55 million people paying 10 cents to get into the cup. I don't know the numbers, so it's really difficult to predict if it's a good business model or not.
Yeah, and unfortunately I think that the numbers on Battle.net are falling. As a lot of the pros have realized that ladder practice isn't really good for tournaments. You know, you need to kind of have that team practice environment, and a lot of the Koreans especially are in that mindset. And then you end up with, you know, the North American ladder. You know, if you want a ladder on that, the quality of play there just isn't quite there to be able to kind of break out and become one of those stars. That's a problem you were talking about earlier, Carmac, where you're like, we have to produce new winners. How do we produce new winners? Well, we're kind of at a point where the Korean model of training, where you live together, you train together, it's this big team environment, is being very successful in producing winners. And there are exceptions. There are guys like Violet, who obviously like lives by himself in America, you know, who's been doing very well. But you see some of these pros come over here, like Chexic Sleep, for instance. Like he came over here and didn't do super well, and didn't really have that really good run at MLG Anaheim or his run through Gigabyte Esports Land. until he went back to Korea and like trained super hard in a Korean practice environment with a lot of his pro friends, working on specific builds for specific matchups for a long period of time. So it was.
I think a lot of that though has to do on the person too.
Sure.
We've had Desra on the show, and he was over in Korea, and he basically said he wouldn't do it again. Wasn't worth it. And then Violet, of course, it does better in a different environment. But I think even beyond all of that, I think what, and I know what Carmac is kind of talking about, is there needs to be an infrastructure in place that is from the bottom up, in which it's about building, using the player base that you might have and building from that and creating these stars as they lead themselves up the rung, but they have to have incentive to do so. I mean, ladders are great, but in my opinion, they're a lot of times they're a waste of time. If you want real tournament experience, you have to play in tournaments, and there has to be competitions for people to play in. And if all of the events are simply about inviting the top players, then the lower tier players just end up stop playing and watch. That's why the numbers show that there are a lot more people watching StarCraft 2 than there are actually playing it. And it's not necessarily means that it's only because of that case. I hope that it's because a lot of people are enjoying StarCraft 2 that may never play it. I've never played StarCraft 2 except for one time, and I got smashed, so I haven't played since, and I don't have time. But I watch a shit ton of it, like more than I ever watched any Quake for years. Partly because it's now streamed, it's much easier to do, but I enjoy it, and I enjoy watching it. So I know there's some of that's in it, but I really think it's about the infrastructure. If we do not have an infrastructure in place, it doesn't matter how big the game is, it doesn't matter how great the media production is, it doesn't matter if it's on TV, HBO, it does not matter. If we don't have something from the bottom up, they will all have the same death. They will all end up just slowly dying.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you guys touched on a really good point about, really starting from the bottom up, because, I mean, how many players are really, let's just say the top level, right? Masters players, right? What is that? That's like, what, 10%? Or
no, Masters is top 2%.
Top 2%, right? So 98% of the folks are diamond and down, right?
Yep.
And at this point, we're talking just like a couple 100,000 players at this point on Battle.net. Like, we're not talking about very, it's gone down drastically, right? Don't quote me on the numbers, but it's pretty close to something like that. And, yeah, I mean, we need to find a way to have, like, Jim, Bob, and Harry, instead of playing poker at their, clubhouse
or
every week, they're playing StarCraft tournaments.
Instead of playing League of Legends. But I mean, the problem with that is I think that, and this is a problem that exists in Brood War too, at a low level, like if you want to play StarCraft and you're in, say, like the Bronze or Silver League, every other game is a different cheese or a different thing, and really the only way to defeat that is scouting, and scouting is like really difficult. Scouting is like a very difficult thing to do, and it's not so much difficult to do, it's difficult to know what you've scouted at low levels of play. And I think that turns a lot of people off, because you finish out the campaign and you're like, oh, this campaign was sweet, and then you're dumped straight into this like, hardcore 1v1 PvP, and people can't potentially handle that. A lot of people.
When was the last time you played Bronze?
Yeah, cheese and bronze.
I'm watching my girlfriend play it. I'm watching my girlfriend play it. Like,
maybe
no, but she's a girl.
She's foragating in Bronze League.
Maybe it's a different Bronze League compared to what I used to play, but they didn't know even proper build orders in Bronze League. It's Gold League in Europe at least. And they cheese in SCV trains and stuff like that in Gold League in Europe. But on the lowest level, I mean, I actually saw this. One of my best friend's son is 10 years old and he plays StarCraft 2.
Okay.
And he plays Bronze League, and it's fairly random. But I do see the point that it's still a steep mountain to climb.
And so getting because honestly, she's only played when I've been like, honey, you have to play more StarCraft so we can play twos together. And I've taught her how to forgate, and that's the only build she knows. And because she's not good at executing, her forgate hits at around 10 to 11 minutes. But most of the games she loses are you know, she got 6 pooled or 10 pooled, and she doesn't know how to deal with a whole bunch of Zerglings running to her base early, because that, you know, requires some micro and things like that. Or she loses to like 5 or 6 barracks, Marine SCVs, all ends. Or she loses to just like some of the like the craziest stuff that it's actually kind of funny, like watching some of the replays. Like there was one guy who just like one base Broodlord rushed, and so she shows up with her 4-gate at like 10 minutes, and he has Broodlords at 10 minutes. And she loses because she's never seen a Broodlord before, you know. But like simple scouting would totally eliminate that. She goes, "Oh wow, this is like Hive at like 8 minutes. What's going on?" You know, and then you just go and kill your opponent. But she doesn't know what she's scouting, and you know she doesn't really know how to scout, so she can't find the 3 proxied barracks. She doesn't know the maps, and so I mean that's a Bronze League, you know, player right there. Like I taught her one build and said, "Go have fun, honey," and she has no fun at all. And yet she loves playing 2s or 3s or 4s, and she loves playing a lot of the custom games, but like 1v1 ladder is like something she never wants to do. So I think you kind of have to like solve that problem, is solve the problem of getting like new people to want to play 1v1 ladder, or even just want to play like 2v2 or 3v3 ladder. But again, I mean, so much of that is just at a low level. It's just like, I mean, even as you get up through the levels, and you said it, you know, at Gold League people have like set up build orders, but a lot of it's just kind of cheesy play, and that's not a lot of fun to lose to like a different form of cheese 10 games in a row. And it's like, how do I scout all that? How do I deal with that? Oh, fuck this game. I'm just not going to play anymore.
Well, I like Gouda cheese. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah,
I love Gouda.
I'm a big fan of
yeah, or Kobe Jack. Yeah, Provolone's good too.
Provolone's good.
But moving on just a little bit, because you guys were talking and I was racking my brain because I had no clue what you were talking about. Carmac, because we're about 20 minutes here to ending this, but Carmac, tell us a little bit about how this year's IEM is going to be. To tell us a little bit about what's going to happen, how is it going to be better, what kind of, I mean, is your big, awesome plate, is it a bigger plate this year that they win? Is it going to be a trophy? What's going to happen this year?
We haven't announced everything yet, but I can talk about what we have announced. We're going to have a bigger tournament for Starcraft 2. We're going to have 24 players competing as opposed to 16 last season. 16 people will qualify online, and the best way to compete on the Intel Extreme Masters is still to qualify online. Anyone can participate in any region. If you qualify online, you are guaranteed, let's say the event takes place in Cologne. If you are a European, you are guaranteed $600. We call it travel support money. This is, you know, for every single player that competes at the event. We could theoretically say, yeah, hey, let's invite Koreans, let's pay for their flights, but then we're not able to afford to help, you know, BCQT and Feast and Slivko and all these other up-and-coming players to attend the event. So we want to treat every single player exactly the same, regardless of if his name is Nesty or if his name is, you know, Johnny something.
Rico.
So you can qualify online for one of the 16 slots, and on day 1 of the event there's going to be an let's call it an open bracket tournament. Let's call it that, where if you haven't managed to qualify online, or if you were busy with, you know, traveling to another event during the qualification, you can send us an email. We have 16 slots for, you know, top professionals that can come and compete in a 32-player tournament on day 1, with 16 players that will come. This is for local players, so giving the Cologne example, on one day before the tournament, we will set up a desk somewhere in a hotel lobby or in the ESL office, and the first 16 players to sign up, they get a ticket to compete at the event. It could be, you know, MVP if he queues up and signs up early, or it could be 16 German kids that want to compete and see if they can, you know, if they have the stones to beat MC in the final. So it's a mix of allowing more local players to get into the tournament, and allowing players that don't really have the time to qualify because they travel too much, or maybe they forgot to sign up or something like that, allowing also them to compete. So we're going to have bigger tournaments. 24 is a really nice number. It produces a really cool show. At the Intel Extreme Masters World Championship, we used this setup where we had 4 groups of 6. Produces a lot of really good matches and produces a really nice bracket where if you win the group you get seeded 1 round forward, so you get a bye in the first round, and the second and third place plays in the playoffs. So we're going to have a really cool bracket. We're not going to have we're not going to have a match for third place anymore in regular stops. Only at the World Championship we will have, because it's about the bronze medal, but otherwise we sacrificed the third place match so that we could do a best of 7 final. So, and by the way, you're the first guys finding it out in the public, I think. We're going to have best of 7 finals in Starcraft 2. What else? Lots of things. If you're coming from outside of Europe, actually, by the way, about the travel support, you're going to get, I think, $950. So it.
Wow.
For the most part, if you buy your ticket early enough, it might actually cover the cost of a round-trip ticket to Cologne, for example. So,
that's really good.
And it doesn't matter if you're Nesty or if you're, Idra's younger brother or whatever. If you're completely unknown, if you go through the qualification, you automatically get the money.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Very
But
nice.
that's something we've already done in the past, and. Yeah, so this is it. What else can I tell you? We're going to have some really cool sponsorships, and we're going to do some really cool stuff with the sponsors. Sponsors we're going to announce probably next week. The next fortnight we're going to announce sponsors, and we're going to do some really unique stuff as well. A third discipline in Intel Extreme Masters. We will have a third discipline, but I cannot announce what it is.
Okay.
All right.
Will we hear about some of that soon? Or are we talking some ways off? Okay.
Yes, third discipline, it's not going to be a video game.
Really?
But we will have a third discipline in Intel Extreme Masters.
Is it rock,
that's all I can say.
Rock, scissors, paper, whatever they
Hey,
call that.
what are you doing there, John, man?
Yeah, that does great, does it? I forgot I'm on camera. I'm wearing my my GGL shirt. It just feels so good.
Oh boy. But okay, yeah, I'm pretty excited to see what that third discipline is. That's not a video game. Maybe magic. but yeah, guys, keep an eye out for IEM. It's coming up. Is this month, right? Or is it this
It's
month?
in August.
It's
the
in
15th, 19th of August. It's going to be epic. Oh, and by the way, we had one stage at last Gamescom for Intel Extreme Masters. Now we will have one stage dedicated to StarCraft only. So if you're a StarCraft fan, you can go and expect to sit down and sit all day and enjoy the best StarCraft you can ever get in Cologne.
Yeah.
And League of Legends fans will also, have their own stage. So no stage sharing this time.
Awesome. Well, guys, I think we only have like 15 minutes left, so why don't we take a few questions from the viewers. Guys, just start typing your questions in the stream chat, and we'll start asking them. Any questions for any of us? Got one question for GWIN, or just us. Assuming GWIN was right, what do you think you should do to discourage cheese in order to stop people leaving the game as a result of being cheese in low leagues? I don't know.
I don't know. Like, I've actually had a conversation with David Kim about this. Like, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago when I was at Blizzard, and I was like, maybe at lower leagues, like if you're in Bronze League, you get vision of what your opponent is doing the whole time. Like, both of you have 100% map vision the whole time, and or like the sight radius for scouting units, things like SCVs earlier in the game, is much larger, so you have a chance to spot those proxy barracks or things like that. And just sort of easing people into that. Maybe in the practice league, you get 100% map vision, but there's no destructible rocks walling up the front of your base. So I just think that, like, easing people into that 1v1, because someone in chat had a good point, and it's something I didn't get a chance to bring up, but in a game like League of Legends, if I play League and I lose, there's 4 other people on my team, you know, and I can just be like, well, those guys were terrible. They were scrubs. I'm the good one here, you know. But in StarCraft, if you lose a 1v1, it's either like it's your fault that you lost, which it always is, or the game is imbalanced, and people are way more likely to jump to the game is imbalanced than, you know, it's my fault I lost.
Mm-hmm.
So people jump to like, oh, this game's fucking dumb. It's cheese all again. Oh, this is banshees, hate them, blah blah blah. Right? And then they or void rays, you know, or DTs, whatever the IMBA unit is, right? You know, you A move your Marines into a bunch of Colossus and all that, and you go, oh, this is stupid. So, yeah, I mean that's kind of what it comes down to. If you I feel like if at the very, very low levels you could see everything your opponent was doing, it would be much easier to make those logical things like, when he makes the robotics bay, that means there's Colossus, I should have Vikings because I see him making this building, right? Makes more sense.
I think a lot of the, I mean, it's kind of a hard issue to fix now.
Yeah,
just in the given state of the state. I mean, just given the state of the game. But you know, this wasn't an issue that was happening when it first came out, when we had like millions of people playing StarCraft. There were, I feel like there were tons of players. Like I remember playing Bronze. Like I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I wasn't like doing any kind of like cheese builds, but I felt like there were equally the same amount of like clueless people I was playing against. So
how long have they been calling them cheese builds? I don't understand that. I can't even, I'll be honest with you. I think it's the dumbest thing in the world. If you find a way to win, who fucking cares how you did it?
Yeah.
Well,
so I call it cheese. I don't understand this cheese crap.
I'm with you on that, John. But what I'm echoing is kind of like the community sentiment on that. Is it's like, well, you know, that was cheesy, and I don't remember you know where that term came from, but it's been around since Brood War, man. Like I remember, you know, people saying, "Oh, that was a fucking cheesy." I remember doing like one base lurker on Icy Cup, and people were like, "Oh, fucking cheeser!" After I'd like destroy their mineral line, you know, one hatch lurker. It was beautiful.
Yeah, but I guess my point is like, yeah, people will cheese, and I don't know, you know, people 2-gate and proxy and that kind of stuff early in the game. But then they got to silver, then they got to gold, you know, whatever. Like the people that stayed in bronze. I mean, the problem right now is that everybody likes to smurf now and just screw around with bronze players. So, you know, it's just. You know,
that might be part of it.
Ruins the game a bit.
That's not good.
Yeah, so there's not a very organic, you know, classifications of folks, and we're, you know, the numbers dwindling, so obviously it just gets even worse, right? But yeah, so hopefully when Heart of the Swarm comes out, you know, maybe it'll kind of naturalize again, and you know, the real bad players will be together, right? So
I hope so. Yeah.
Chris, I have a question coming up. Unless you have somebody online or anything.
No, I was just we're just taking questions out of stream chat today. So.
Okay. I've got a question from our good friend from Check 6.
Okay,
Greg. This is geared more towards Carmac. Is it more important now than ever for companies to actually give money to competitions to support the events? Like, for instance, how receptive has Valve been to that about CS:GO? Do you, even if you don't, I mean, if you don't know, or you might know, traditionally they haven't liked that. Basically, I think what he's saying is traditionally developers have not given money to organizations like ESL or CSN or MLG to run events. It seems like that might be changing slightly because they do have an understanding of the importance of esports for their title. Do you feel that it's more important now for these companies to support competitions with actual prizing? Or should it be more about what they develop in the game?
I think Kalaris needs a haircut. That's the first thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Told you that.
He certainly needs a haircut. His flock of seagulls needs to disappear.
Okay.
Aside of that, yeah, that's right, Kalaris. That's right. I'm reading the chat. Cut your hair, man. Cut your hair. So,
you're just jealous he has hair.
Actually, I do have hair. I'm just, you know.
Choose not to grow it out. That's what I tell everyone too.
No. See, Carmac actually has hair. Okay.
Right, enough. What did I do? I was stupid to even bring it up.
Mr. Rogaine over here. Jeez.
You can do the Wayne Rooney and do hair. Well, whatever. Sure, it's great if a company puts money behind a title, but there really is no good business case in supporting an esport if you're a publisher that releases a game and forgets about it. Coming back to what I said, there needs to be a business case behind it. Sure, you can believe that esports is great and people are going to love Valve, but there's no way to measure that, that amount of love, and there's really no way to measure how many people will actually keep buying Valve products because Valve, whatever company actually, it doesn't have to be Valve, it could be EA, it could be Ubisoft, it could be whoever else. There's no guarantee, there's no direct correlation in the business model. So why should the people that manage money in these companies, why should they sign off on these esports budgets if there is no ROI behind it that could be in any way proven?
Okay.
There needs to be an
I
ROI
agree.
behind it for companies, and League of Legends, a game like League of Legends, which is based on microtransactions, which is free to play, a game like Dota 2, these games do have an esports ROI behind them.
I have a quick question, and you probably will not be able to answer it. Why is it that organizations think that they can charge the developers of a game to run events for their game? For instance, it's been said that the reason that League of Legends was not on the MLG circuit to begin with was because MLG was asking $200,000 to be included on their circuit. Do you think we're going down the wrong road if we are asking money from developers to run their events?
It really depends. There are several cases. I mean, if there's John Clark, the CEO of a new gaming company that has this wonderful game, John Clark versus Aliens, and he wants it to be the next major esports, but the game sucks.
Yeah.
I will still take your money, and I will still run competitions for the game.
Like World of Tanks.
It's World of Tanks actually is a very healthy game in terms of the. I'm relatively open to games as long as the game has a community of players that want to compete, a community of people that want to watch, and the same guy consistently wins. It's a good game. I mean, I fucking hate baseball, but that doesn't make it a bad game, right?
True.
I'm
True.
one guy, and then there's 50,000 people in the Yankee Stadium every week or whatever the hell, and the fact that I hate baseball doesn't mean that's a bad game.
Correct.
The fact that somebody hates any game, World of Warcraft, World of Tanks, Starcraft 2, doesn't make it a bad game. What makes it a good game, though, is the three things that I said: community of players, community of spectators, and the best player always wins at the end. Anyway, your John Clark versus Aliens game will never be in the Intel Extreme Masters if it sucks. But I will still run competitions for it if you pay me. I mean, it's just a normal industry service.
Yeah, I feel the same. We've had people come to us and say we're the developers of this free-to-play game, some sort of COD ripoff or something, and we want to get our name out there, and we see that you guys have users, and we'll give you $500 to run an event. I mean, Tribes did the same thing. Hi-Res did the same thing with us. So I definitely understand that. It just at some point it's like, is the game bigger? Is the event bigger than the game, or is the game bigger than the event?
I was just going to say that. It's kind of backwards. I mean, it's
And
not really backwards because right now the event is bigger.
Right.
One
some
thing
ways.
that needs to be said is that every company that runs tournaments, we all have budgets. And ideally, if my budget was completely unlimited, I'd be running tournaments probably for 7 different games or 9 different games. But at the end of the day, it comes down to how many stages can you realistically build, how much internet can you realistically get for the streaming, how much floor space can you buy. It all adds up. And yes, Kalaris, my dear flock of seagulls, these guys playing D3.
Why are you picking on Kalaris so much? He's a great guy.
He is a great guy. He
I know.
is. Thing is, he needs a fucking haircut.
I actually think his hair kicks ass. Maybe it's because I'm jealous.
In a Lord of the Rings kind of way, yes, it does.
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings. Oh man, we gotta get a picture of Kalaris on here.
Maybe if he was commentating Warcraft 3 then or Warcraft 4, then his hair would fit better. But in Starcraft, he should.
No. I think that's exactly what Starcraft needs. Are you kidding me? A little bit more personality. For fuck's sakes, there's a bunch of dorks running around playing it. Let's get some people with some personality. Kalaris has got it. I love the hair. It's awesome. Put a bandana on her or something.
Uther Lightbringer. That's his new nickname. You should change his Carmac. Next time you interview him, you should interview him as Uther Lightbringer instead of Kalaris.
I like Flock of Seagulls personally, but
I call him the zookeeper. You know how many pets he's got? Seriously, he's got 27 different animals, some of which I've never even heard of.
You know, I went to the ESL TV office one day, and there's an empty room. I actually called Kalaris, and I kid you not, chanting like Elvish from Lord of the Rings and waving a sword in an empty room at the ESL TV office.
Shack of shit.
Oh my god. I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh shoot.
At all. Not surprised.
That's Kalaris for you.
Was he LARPing by himself in an empty room, or what?
Huh?
He was LARPing? He was,
no, he's still talking stuff like yapping about orcs and waving the sword around, you know?
Oh god.
Yep.
There you go.
Right.
That's when you just
we have all sorts of props in the studio, like Viking helmets and stuff, and wigs and stuff. There was a sword, and he really was waving that sword around like a Lord of the Rings character or some shit.
I just put Kalaris on the stream, guys, for you guys that don't know what he's talking about. But
it looks great. It looks fantastic.
Sitting next to Carmac, but guys, we don't have too much more time for questions, so why don't we go on to shout-outs?
I was totally kidding. About that sword thing.
There's a question just popped up. I don't know if you saw
last
it.
one. All right, last one.
Question to Carmac and John. Do you hope that ID will start releasing, for example, Quake 5 and support it esports-wise, not only QuakeCon, sort of like Riot does?
Do I hope? Yes.
Yeah, I do too. And I think they were a little ahead of their time. Not really ahead of their time, but their idea of a browser game is fantastic.
Yeah, Quake 5 is really good.
Yeah, now they just need to find a way to do a better job of marketing it, or actually market it at all. And then I do agree.